They say no fire lives this long without a name, without fuel, without want. But in the quiet ruins of Valhalla, where time folds like soft parchment and ivy swallows the bones of towers, there is a flame that never died. Not fully, not truly. It flickers now, stubborn in the heart of a forgotten hall, embers curled into the stone like a vow unsaid. The chamber that holds it once shimmered with light. Now it is a temple of silence. No one comes here. Not anymore. The scholars abandoned Valhalla when the fires began to whisper. When books caught flame for telling the wrong stories, when the well water tasted of memory, and when one night a single scream rose from the hill and never stopped, she was the last to leave. He was the one who stayed. They made no promises. Only one rule: do not return. And for 17 years, she obeyed, until the letter stopped coming, until a name resurfaced, carved in blood into the side of a fallen shrine, until she began to dream of fire again. The night she returned, Valhalla breathed. Wind wound through the broken courtyard, stirring leaves that had slept in. Peace. An owl blinked in its tower, startled. And beneath the floor of the flame chamber, stone cracked. He felt it, not in the usual way, not with eyes or ears, but with the part of him that had never stopped watching the door. He was not as he once was. His hair, once black as stormlight, now threaded with ash. His robes stitched with glyphs of heat and silence. His voice rarely used, but he knew. Before the doors creaked, before the ivy bent aside, before the silver veil brushed the threshold, he knew she was here. She did not speak when she entered, nor did he. Some silences are not emptiness. They are echoes of a language older than sound. The flame swelled between them, golden, quiet, almost reverent, as if greeting an old friend it was never meant to see again. She walked slowly, not out of fear, but reverence. The floor beneath her boots seemed to remember her weight. Dust spiraled in the air, circling her like ghosts made shy. He did not rise. He sat where he always did beside the flame, its light painting his face in sorrowed gold. He looked at her, not startled, not welcoming, but like a man watching the final page of a long-forgotten story finally turn. "You shouldn't have come," he said, voice raw from disuse. She did not answer, only lowered her veil, and beneath it ties. That saw through time. That burned with a gift he'd once feared and once kissed. He looked away first. Outside, the ruins creaked. The walls remembered laughter, now swallowed in ivy. The statues, broken at the neck, seemed to lean closer. Even the birds dared not sing. "They sent me," she said finally. "A murder. Free. Bodies, all marked with fire. And a name that hasn't been spoken in years." He waited, but the name didn't come. She didn't need to say it. He already knew. "It began again," she whispered. "A curse. Or the spell. I don't know what to call it anymore." He rose then. And for the first time in 17 years, the flame flared high enough to touch the ceiling. "Then you shouldn't have come," he said again, but this time softer. Like someone remembering how to pray. She turned to go. Her fingers brushed the edge of a stone pillar and flinched. Visions sparked behind her eyes. Not of the murder, not yet, but of a boy with fire on his hands and love on his lips, and of a promise broken not by betrayal but by fate. The flame hissed quietly, and somewhere deep beneath Valhalla, a buried heartbeat began again. Her truth lives in silence, her curse in touch. She doesn't remember when it first began, this ache beneath her fingertips. A strange inheritance passed down through the bloodline like a secret nobody wanted to keep. To touch is to see, not skin or shadow, but truth. Buried, broken, burning truth. As a child, she wore gloves, As a woman, she wore veils. And somewhere in between, she learned the art of distance, how to smile without softening, how to help without holding, how to feel without ever truly being felt. She had no name for it, no cure. Just a quiet knowledge that touch for her was a key and every lock it opened left a mark. The man in the flame chamber had once been the only soul she dared touch, briefly, blindly, when the world was still golden. And fire meant warmth instead of warning. He never flinched. Not then. But now, 17 years later, even his gaze holds caution. Okay, as if the years have taught him that some truths are better left untouched. They marked the walls with fire, she tells him, hands folded, tightly behind her back. 3 victims, different cities, same spell signature. He nods, slow. And my name? She doesn't answer. The silence does it for her. The flame between them crackles once, as if disapproving of old ghosts being stirred. What? Do they think I did? He asks, not with anger. It's tired curiosity, like a man asking after a rumor he's already lived through once. She studies him carefully, silver veil trailing at her shoulders like mist. He looks the same, but sharper, like glass long held in flame. Older, yes, but not in the way mortals age. He's burned down to truth, and it shows. They think you began the curse, she says. That the spell started in Valhalla, that it began with love. He lets out a laugh, quiet, shallow, full of edges. Then they've never been in love, he murmurs. It doesn't begin. It devours. She looks away because she knows. And because she remembers the way his hands once cupped her face in a corridor of candlelight, when she still believed longing was something that passed. You shouldn't have come alone, he says, shifting to sit beside the flame again. The light casts his features into stories. Pain, regret, restraint. Not even the fire dares touch him now. I didn't come as a woman, she replies. Quietly, I came as a seeker. I was sent by who? The Covenant. He looks up sharply. They must be desperate. They are. She steps closer, but not enough. Never enough. They gave me 3 days to find the source, to return with proof. He tilts his head, gaze narrowing. And if you don't? She doesn't answer, because they both already know. Flame guttered, then surged. The chamber seemed smaller, the air heavier, and the silence deeper. We'll find the truth, he says. But then he adds, more quietly, if you can follow the rules. Her brow lifts, barely. Rules? No. Touching? He says it first. And she knows why. No asking about the fire, he adds. And she doesn't argue. And no crossing the red line. His gaze shifts to the stone floor where, beneath the soot and dust, a faint crimson arc curves around. The flame? What happens if I cross it? She asks. He doesn't answer, not directly, only says you'll see too much. And you won't come back from it. So they stand there, between rules unspoken and questions unasked, between years of distance and the breadth of memory. And neither says it, but both know. They're pretending not to want more. Once, it was a vow. Now it devours. It begins with petals, always petals. Folded into mouths, pressed behind ears. Left blooming across the chest above the heart, and when the body is found, the flower is still warm. That is how the spell announces itself. With grace, with ruin. With roses made of flame. She sees them in her sleep. Not the bodies, but the moment before, 2 lovers, hands clasped, a vow whispered between breaths. Then fire, always fire. And in its wake, one left behind the other, burned into the earth. It was called a bond spell once, she says, unrolling the map across the table, used only in sacred rites. For lovers who wish their hearts bound beyond death. He doesn't look at the map. He stares into the flame. Old magic, he murmurs. Naive. It's cruel in its purity. Its purity. They believed it was mercy. He finally turns to her. Love isn't mercy. The pattern is cruel. 3 cities, 3 couples, only 1 survivor each time, but broken, half mad, singed by magic they cannot speak of. Each survivor remembers the same thing, the touch, the fire, and a name hers, not spoken aloud, never written, but felt, carved into them through the curse. I think I cast it, she says, voice low, careful. That I created this spell and sent it to the world like a song no one could forget. He says nothing. She watches the flame stretch, twisting, into the shape of a rose before folding inward again. But it wasn't mine, she whispers. It was born here. In Valhalla, in that temple. He nods, slow, like a man wading through the past with each breath. Do you remember? He says what we offered there? Our breath stills. The temple is only ruins now, beneath the cliffs near the old moon bridge. But 17 years ago, it still breathed. Arched windows of amethyst, songs written in silver fire across its walls. They went there, young, full of want and wonder, and terrible hope. They made a vow, not spoken, but sealed with touch, and in her hands, the truth bloomed. She saw everything he had hidden, the shadows, the magic, the longing. He saw nothing, only her. That was the first time she felt the curse shift inside her. Not painful, not yet. It's just a tremble like the earth thinking of breaking. It wasn't a curse then, she says aloud. Not to me, but to the flame, it was, he answers. Fire does not forgive being bound. She stands now by the red arc on the floor, 1 breath from crossing it. Someone has twisted it, she says. Taken what we made and turned it into death. He doesn't move, only says, then, we'll untwist it. Together. But her hands stay behind her back, her veil stays drawn, and the space between them stays unbroken. Because to touch again would be to see too much, and neither of them is ready to look that deep. Not yet. Not when the flame still remembers the way they once kissed. And not when, in the depths of Valhalla, the spell stirs once more soft. As petals sharp as loss, they wrote no treaty, only boundaries between breaths. By morning, the sky over Valhalla has turned the color of old parchment washed with silver. Torn with cloud, they sit beneath it in the east tower, place where ivy climbs like lost thoughts and every step creaks like it remembers them. The table between them is cracked, the tea untouched, the silence familiar. Rules must be spoken, even if they will not be followed. Even if their hands are already betraying them, gripping chair edges too tightly, brushing against the same page, of the same map with the same long hesitation. He speaks first, because she will not. Not until she's certain her voice won't tremble. We work together, but not as we were. His tone is even, but his eyes flicker like the flame they left burning below. No touching, he says, as if naming it makes it easier to obey. She nods once, a pact formed without parchment. No questions, he adds, about the fire. And though she opens her mouth, though her mind blisters with questions, she nods again, because rules are easier than truths. And silence has always been her strongest shield. But the third rule, he does not offer it. He waits, her gaze drops to the red arc on the floor, dawn in crushed garnet dust and sealed with spellglass. Its curve surrounds the hearth like a protective scar. What happens if I cross it? She asks again, softly, almost tenderly, as though the flame might answer instead of him. He doesn't blink, only says, you see the end of the vow. Her breath catches, not the vow they made, not the one spoken in the temple. The true vow, The one no lips ever spoke, but every heartbeat carried. They set the rules because they must, not because they want to. He watches the way she keeps her gloves on even when alone. She watches the way he never turns his back to the fire. They notice the same things, but say none of them. And so the days begin. A rhythm of near silence. It's a dance of glances and questions, only half-formed. They read over spells by candlelight, pages curled with age and heat. They searched the ruins by moon, their boots the only sound between broken halls. Once her hand brushes his coat as they pass in a corridor. He stills. She freezes. But neither pulls away. They just wait, breathe, and move on. They pretend well. Pretend not to see the flame that flares when she enters the room. Pretend not to remember the kiss left half-finished 17 years ago. Pretend they are here. Only to stop a curse, not to touch a memory still smoldering beneath the skin. And yet one night she stands at the edge of the red line. The fire is low. His back is turned. And in her hand is a silver ring burned clean of its name. The air stills. The silence listens. But her foot never crosses. Not yet. 'Cause even now, with the curse whispering through walls and love buried beneath rules, some part of her still fears. It's the truth more than the flame. And some part of him is still hoping she'll be the one to break the rules first. The past is never gone. It only waits to be touched. The box was small, ash-black, iron-latched. Buried beneath a floorboard in the old library wing, where windows blinked dust into beams, and the shelves held books that no one dared open. She found it by accident, or perhaps not. Nothing in Valhalla is truly accidental. The box whispered when she touched it. Not with words, with weight. The kind that fills the throat before grief ever reaches the eyes. He was nearby when she opened. It close enough to stop her, but he didn't. Inside, only 3 things. An old bracelet woven with sun-faded thread and stones the color of river glass. A letter sealed but never sent. And a piece of ribbon red frayed, burned at one end. She did not need to touch them. She remembered them. Her fingers hovered over the bracelet first. She had worn it once, the day they walked the cliffs, and swore they would never forget what the sky looked like when the fire hadn't come. "You kept this," she said. He didn't answer. Some truths don't need a voice. Some memories live louder in silence. She turned the letter next. Unbroken seal. Familiar handwriting hers. But she never remembered writing it. She blinked, slowly. Traced the wax with one gloved thumb. "When did I—" "You left it," he murmured. "The day you ran." Her voice barely stirred the air. "I didn't run." He looked at her then. Softly, not accusing, not bitter. Just honest. He didn't stay. The ribbon was last, red, ruined at the edge. He picked it up before she could, held it between them like something holy. "This was part of the sealing ceremony," he said. "Do you remember?" She didn't need to. Her skin did. They had stood in the temple's inner sanctum, 2 breaths from one another. The ribbon between their wrists, binding them in promise, not permanence. A magic made of choice. They hadn't known what it would awaken, what it would cost. They had only wanted something to hold on to, and in the end, they had burned for it. Now all that remained were fragments. A bracelet too fragile to wear. A letter she could not open. And a ribbon that still smelled faintly of smoke. That night, she dreamed. Not of blood or bodies, but of things not said. Rooms they never entered. A kiss that never finished. He stood behind her in the dream, and when she turned, he said nothing. But his eyes begged her to touch him. And in dreams, she never wore gloves. The next morning, she left the box where she found it reburied. Untouched, but the weight of it clung to her wrists, to her voice, to the corners of her gaze when he entered the room. He noticed. Of course he did. He said nothing, only added more logs to the fire, And when she passed, the map, his fingers brushed hers. Not enough to see, not enough to burn. Just enough to remember what it was like to almost be loved without fear. Outside, the leaves turned brittle in the wind. The curse stirred deeper in the ruins, but inside they stood still, carrying a box. Neither of them could bear to open again. Not yet, not while the flames still watched. They walked not toward the truth, but through it. The road out of Valhalla was not a road at all. It was memory and moonlight and the soft crunch of silence underfoot. No horses, no guards. Just two figures in twilight, cloaked against the wind and something deeper. He walked ahead, always a few steps. Never too far, never close enough. She followed, careful as breath, her gloved hands tucked into the folds of her coat, her eyes on the sky as if it might offer answers the ground refused to give. The first ruin came by morning. A temple drowned in vines, its altar cracked in two. She touched a column, and it spoke to her, not in words but in flashes. Fire, a kiss, a scream, a circle of salt turned red. This was one of the bond sites, she whispered. He nodded. Once. Quiet, as though remembering burned worse than fire. How many are left? She asked. Too many. They made camp that night on a cliff above the river glade. The stars hung low as if listening. She could not sleep. Too many things, whispered in the dark. Names she had not spoken in years, vows she had broken without breath. He sat by the fire, turning something in his hands. It's a small blade, old, not for defense, but ritual. She sat across from him. They said nothing for a long while. Bendu, you still dream? She asked. He didn't look up, only of the moment before it all went wrong. She nodded, because that was the moment that echoed longest. The next day, they crossed the moonlit bridge. It's an ancient thing, carved with runes, long faded. Below, the river moved like smoke. They paused at its center, not by plan, but by pull. Here, the curse had passed. They could feel it, its cold air thick with something unseen. The runes glowed faint beneath their boots, like wounds remembering pain. Someone died here, she said. He didn't deny it, just pressed his palm to the stone rail and closed his eyes. That night, they found shelter in a hollow tower. Wind howled through broken glass. They didn't speak of the curse, not directly, yet instead they shared food without appetite. Traded glances like confessions too early to say, watched the fire without moving closer to it or each other. But when sleep came, she drifted against the wall, cloak wrapped tight, and dreamed of a time they walked this path hand in hand. In the dream, he turned to her and said, "The shadows know us." And she replied, "Because we made them." The next day, the wind carried whispers. A voice in a ruined chapel, a laugh in a hollow grove, a name etched fresh into an old gravestone. None of it made sense, and yet it led them on, past shrines cracked open, through gardens burned bare, along trails where no one had walked in years, but the ashes were still warm. And all the while, they didn't speak of touch, or of the red line, or of the letter still hidden in the hollow of her sleeve. They only walked beside one another, never too far, never close enough, letting the path write the story that neither of them was yet ready to tell. Some names, once whispered, split the world in two. The room was round, a tower at the edge of the Scarlands, where stars were said to fall in silence and never rise again. She stepped into it without meaning to, chasing a flicker of heat in the coldest part of the journey. What she found instead was a mirror, tall, arched, veined with silver so fine it pulsed. It stood without frame or hook, resting only on shadow, as though the room had birthed it whole. He didn't follow her in. Some doors they still opened alone, She approached slowly, not for fear but for memory. The closer she came, the more the mirror changed, not warped, not broken, knowing. Her reflection stood where she expected. Same veil, same gloves. Same sorrow settled across her shoulders like snow, but her reflection did not blink when she did not shift when she turned. It waited, watched, and then it whispered her name. Not the name given to her, not the one on scrolls or stones or tongues, but the name bound in blood, the one she had offered in the temple when she thought love could be sealed without price. The moment it left the mirror's lips, a crack split the glass from top to heel, silent, flawless, inevitable. He burst in too late. She stood frozen, one hand raised, not touching, not trembling, but caught in the hush between sound and aftermath. His voice came like flint. "What did you say?" Her eyes didn't leave the mirror. "I didn't. It did. What name?" He was closer now, closer than rules allowed. She said nothing, because the name wasn't his to know anymore. The mirror began to bleed. Not red, not liquid, but memory. 100 versions of her bloomed behind the glass, young and wild, angry and soft, gloved, bare, lost. They walked the temple again. They kissed the boy with fire in his hands. They burned. They left. They stayed. They died. All at once. He reached for her hand without thinking, but just before his skin met. Hers, the mirror screamed. A sound without sound, a break without shatter, and then silence. The mirror went dark. Our reflection vanished. Only the crack remained, a single silver thread gleaming through black glass. She turned to him slowly. He hadn't moved his hand, but his face, something in it, had broken too. "Your name," he said softly. "It's part of the curse." She didn't nod. She didn't have to. Outside, wind scraped the stone like breath. Inside, the air shifted. Neither stepped forward, neither turned away. Between them stood a mirror that no longer reflected, only remembered, and somewhere. In its broken depth, a vow once whispered in love was still echoing, trying to become something else. Not punishment, not grief, just the soft beginning of truth. Some arrivals echo louder than departures ever did. They heard the hoofbeats before they saw him. 3 strides behind the breath of dusk, hoof on stone like thunder held in restraint. She turned first. His eyes followed her instinct. And there at the edge of the road leading out of the hollow forest, a figure dismounted in silence. His cloak was untouched by dust. His boots bore no mud. His face precisely as memory left. If memory were prone to exaggeration. "You came," she said, but it wasn't joy in her voice. It's only history, and a touch of inevitability. "You summoned," he replied, and the smile on his lips did not reach his eyes. He greeted her as one might greet a relic, something sacred, but long shelved. And he looked at the man beside her only once. A glance, brief, piercing. "The covenant grows impatient," he said. "They've sent more than letters this time." Folded her arms, gloves creaking faintly. "I told them I was close." He nodded, but not in belief. "And yet you're still wandering ruins, still chasing spells with." His gaze flicked again to the man beside her. Old stories. Her heart did not stutter, but her breath. Did he had once meant safety, certainty, the clean, sharp edge of logic in a world of myth? He offered her escape then. Now he offered something worse, answers. 3 more bodies, he said, stepping closer. Burned with the same signature. One even bore your mark. His tone was smooth. His words not her mark. The one. She sealed her letters with, the one she hadn't used in 17 years. He offered no explanation, only the knowledge. And the way he looked at her made her feel as if the curse had already passed through her and was simply looping back. The fire mage watched in silence, not with jealousy, but with caution. This was a man who dealt in clarity. Clarity has no room for longing. That night, the three of them shared the same fire, but not the same warmth. He brought charts, runes, theories too neat to trust. He spoke of containment, of names etched out, of breaking the cycle clean. She listened, but she didn't hear. Her gaze kept straying across the flames to the man who had stayed when the vow burned. To the one who never asked her to be fixed, only remembered what it was like when they still believed in softness. The rival never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His power was in his presence, in his promise of a version of her that never touched cursed mirrors or kissed fire. He offered her certainty, but not understanding. Still, she hesitated. Still, her hands trembled when they passed too near the one cloaked in smoke. Still, she felt something ancient ache when the other man looked at her with that silence that said, "I remember the girl you were, and I love the woman you became, flaws and flame alike." When dawn came, the rival left early to scout. He kissed her hand, not formally, precisely, without tremor. She did not flinch, but she did not watch him ride away either. She turned toward the flame instead, toward the man who hadn't offered answers, only presence. And in her chest something shifted, not enough to speak, but enough to burn. It was never meant to happen, so of course it did. The day was ordinary. Such a word still held meaning in a land threaded with curses. They were in the old scriptorium, pages scattered like leaves on the wind, parchment curled at the corners, ink faded to rust. The rival had gone ahead. To scout, he said, but the air felt lighter without him. They worked in silence, close, not touching. Her gloves brushed page after page while he traced spell glyphs in the dust with careful hands. She reached for a tome. He did too. Not quickly, not recklessly, not recklessly. Just at the same moment. And time, that sly conspirator, forgot to warn them. Skin to skin, his fingers closed around hers, bare, unprotected, brief, not long enough for regret, long enough for everything else. The world did not shatter. It hushed. The air pulled inward like breath before a name. Her knees buckled. His hand steadied her instinctively, and that was the second touch. Longer, worse. Vision cracked through her like glass kissed by lightning. She saw a temple flooded with firelight, his lips on hers beneath falling ash, his hands shaking when he tied the red ribbon between them. His fear not of her but of the depth of his own love. She saw the moment he let her go, not out of anger, but belief that he had to, or else the curse would take them both. She saw the truth. He had burned for her once, and never stopped. He saw her standing alone in a winter field, letter unsent in her fist, her voice breaking as she whispered his name into empty air. He saw her touch others, not for love, but for duty. Each one stealing a part of her until she barely remembered how to reach without fear. He saw the truth. She had loved him, still did, and she had carried that love like a blade beneath her skin. The visions passed, but they did not fade. They settled, deep, inevitable, like gravity. She stepped back first, shaken, eyes wide, lips parted but wordless. He did not move, just stared, as if afraid even breath would make it worse. "You weren't?" "Supposed to," she whispered. He nodded once. "I know. No apologies. None would be true. None would be enough." The air between them trembled. No longer empty. No longer safe. She turned away, not because she didn't want more, but because she did. And wanting now was a dangerous thing. The rest of the day passed with too much quiet. No glances, no rules spoken. But something between them had shifted, subtle, like the scent of smoke in hair long after the fire's gone out. That night, she did not dream, but he did. And in it, she touched him again, not by mistake, not in fear, but with both hands and her name on his lips like a promise. He woke before dawn, sweating, aching, and downstairs. The flame in Valhalla's great hearth had doubled in height, as if it too had finally remembered what it was waiting for. It was never just a ruin, it was a witness. The path narrowed. Beneath their feet, a ledge carved into the side of the cliffs, slick with moss and silence. Below them, the sea whispered secrets into the rocks, but she heard none of it. Only her own heartbeat, dragging behind her like a wounded thing. He walked ahead, not to lead, but to protect. Old habits, instincts. The ones forged when they first came here, years ago, as two people who thought love could make them immune to ruin. The entrance to the temple stood hidden behind a curtain of ivy, so thick it hummed with residual charm. She stepped forward. He reached out to part it, but stopped, waited. Let her do it, 'cause this time it had to be her choice. Inside, the air was thick with memory. Not dust, memory. Columns bent from centuries of salt wine, inscriptions burned into the ceiling with flame magic, still glowing faintly, like love letters etched into bone. They walked without speaking. There was too much to say, and none of it belonged to now. This place had been sacred once, not because of what it promised, but because of what it required. "It's still here," she whispered, as they reached the central chamber. In the center, the altar, smooth stone, blackened edges, veins of red quartz webbed through it like a heartbeat frozen mid-throb. It was here they had sealed the vow, not a wedding, not a bond. Something older, deeper. The vow had no name, only intent to burn together or not at all. And something had twisted that vow, made it cruel, repetitive, hungry. The killings, they echoed the vow's signature. Each victim marked with its glow. Each death a warped reflection of what once was love. "I should have known," she said, kneeling by the altar. Her gloves trembled as she touched the stone. "No one could have," he murmured, watching her. "You did." He didn't deny it. In her pocket, a charm, a single ember wrapped in silver thread. Gifted to her when she left this place, never meant to be used. She held it out now. It pulsed. The temple responded, groaned, like an old god waking. Glyphs on the walls sparked back to life. The flame at the altar reignited. "We want to break the vow," he said. "You have to offer something new." Her throat tightened. "What if I don't want to break it?" His eyes met hers, steady, aching. "Then we rewrite it." She closed her eyes, touched the altar with bare fingers this time, and whispered, not a spell, not a plea, just his name. The flame pulsed. Softer this time, warmer, as if the curse for just one moment remembered it had once been a blessing. He stepped beside her, placed his hand over hers. No visions this time, no pain, just heat. Shared, chosen. The vow reshaped itself not into binding, but into becoming. Neither spoke of love, not yet, 'cause this time they weren't sealing the ending. They were lighting the beginning. To speak truth beneath flame is to risk being undone by it. Valhalla had not seen this many souls in one room for decades. Yet no one laughed, no one murmured. Not even the fire dared crackle too loud. This was not celebration. This was reckoning. The suspects stood in a ring, encircled by torches, enchanted to flare with falsehood. A truth spell danced on the ceiling, casting patterns like falling constellations. And in the center, her, not dressed for power, not armored, but veiled in white. Her fingers bare, eyes rimmed with ash from the altar. She had touched the vow. She had rewritten it, okay? And it had told her things, okay? Things no one else should know. He watched her from the shadows, hands folded behind his back. Not to appear calm, but to stop them from reaching for her. Even now, after all this, she walked into fire alone. The first suspect stepped forward. A former priest of Valhalla, now turned scholar of the old ways. "I never knew the curse was active again," he said, voice steady. A torch behind him flickered blue. Liar. One by one they spoke. Nobles. Mages. Her former rival offering charm in place of answers. Each gave a piece of themselves, some true, some fractured, some broken beyond recognition. And each time they lied, the fire told her. Not in words, but in a pull, a warmth behind her ribs like a name remembered too late. Then he stepped forward, not summoned, but drawn. He did not look at the circle, only at her. "I knew the vow was cracking," he said. "I knew the deaths echoed it. The torches stayed golden, truth, but I didn't know how to stop it until you came back." She said nothing. Because if she spoke, the ache in her throat might spill into something raw. And this moment wasn't for them. Not yet. A silence fell. Not empty, but waiting. Then she turned. Walked toward the circle's center, past Truthfire and Suspicion, past every pair of eyes that watched too closely, and spoke. The killer. "Believed the vow was broken," she said, her voice soft but steady. "They thought binding others would repair it, would restore balance." A murmur. But it was never about balance, it was about choice. And they took that choice away. She raised her hand. A single ember floated above her palm. "From the altar, from the vow. Carry the flame now, and it remembers." The ember flared and drifted, slowly, inevitably, to one figure in the circle. Not the rival, not the priest, a quiet girl. A handmaid once banished, forgotten, overlooked, until now. She wept as the fire circled her, not in rage, but in grief. "He promised me," the girl whispered. "Said if I just did what he couldn't, you'd come back. He said you belonged to him." She collapsed. The fire cooled. The truth was done. And still, she did not look at him. Not yet. But as the torches dimmed and the suspects scattered like leaves, she lingered by the dying flame. He came to her side, waited. She turned only slightly and asked quietly, "Would you have chosen me again? If it meant the vow burned us?" His voice cracked like tinder. "I would choose you even if it meant never being touched again." And still, she did not answer. Because some confessions must be held a little longer, like breath before a kiss. Storms that do not reach only mourn. The flames had gone out long before morning, yet Valhalla still glowed. Not with fire, but with memory. She stood at the edge of the courtyard where broken columns met wild ivy and watched the sky unravel. It had been raining for hours, softly, steadily, as if the heavens remembered everything she had tried to. Forget no one stopped her as she left the hall, not even him. Perhaps they all understood. Some departures must be made in silence, else the goodbye shatter the heart too completely. Her gown, white at dusk, was now heavy with gray. Not in magic, but in rain. He had not followed. And still, she felt him like heat on the skin after the flame is gone. His words from the circle haunted her. "I would choose you even if it meant never being touched again." She had not answered. Not because she didn't know, but because she did. And it scared her more than any curse. The vow was rewritten. The killer unmasked. Justice, perhaps, done. Something in her remained unfinished. She wandered past the outer gates, feet bare, the rain erasing her tracks before she made them. There, beneath the weeping tree, an ancient ash twisted by. Time she sank to the earth. Let it all fall from her. Not tears, not sobs, just the weight of everything. She remembered the first time she had seen him. Not the fire, not the flame, him, a boy with eyes like embers, who had looked at her not as a prophecy, not as a danger, but as a girl who could choose, who could be wanted without being feared. She had kissed him once, on a balcony edged in frost, not knowing. The cost? That kiss had started the vow. This silence, this ache was all that remained. A branch cracked. Her heart did not startle. It softened, 'cause she knew the rhythm of his step, even when the world blurred with rain. He stood behind her for a moment, not speaking, letting the storm say everything. Then softly he knelt. Not beside her, but across from her, so she would see him. His hair was soaked, his cloak darker than shadow, his eyes steady. He didn't reach for her, didn't ask. Just spoke, voice rough with what he'd held too long. I looked for you in every room after you left, even in the ones I swore never to enter again. Her breath hitched. He continued. I was afraid, not of the curse, but of choosing you againly to lose you a second time. A pause. Then quieter, but I think the vow knew better than either of us. Because I never really stopped burning. She reached up, removed her veil, let the rain touch her fully, skin bare, soul trembling. And then, only then, did she speak. I was never afraid of burning, she said, only of being the one who lit the match. A moment, then she leaned forward, forehead to forehead, breath to breath. Not a kiss, not yet. Just this. Come find me at dawn, she whispered. I'll have my answer then. And she stood, left him in the rain, soaked. Silent, but not alone. Behind her, Valhalla stood watch. Beneath her, the earth softened with memory. And above, the rain kept falling as if it, too, had something to say. Not all flames destroy. Some remember. He found her where the first light broke, not in a grand chamber, not beneath the sacred tree, but at the hearth of an abandoned watchtower, where fire had once been kept for lost travelers. The stone walls were cracked, the wood long splintered, but someone had rekindled the embers. They did not blaze. They pulsed, like breath, like waiting. She sat beside them, hair still damp from rain, a blanket around her shoulders that did little to shield her from the cold. He paused at the threshold, watched her for a moment, then stepped forward without a word. When she didn't look up, he sat across the fire from her, hands open, no weapons, no defenses. Just presence. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but thick, as if even the air needed time. Finally, she spoke. I used to think if I ever broke the curse, I'd be empty afterward, as if it had been the only thing holding me together. A log cracked. The fire breathed. But now, it's gone, okay? And I'm still here. Still? Me? She looked at him. So what does that mean? His voice was low, like a song sung too many times in secret. It means you were never the curse. A soft breath escaped her lips. Almost a laugh, almost a sob. You always say the thing I try not to hope for. Because you always deserve to hear it, he said, and his voice did not shake. She shifted slowly, drew something from beneath her cloak. A scrap of parchment, creased and faded. A letter. She handed it to him without touching his fingers. I wrote it the night I first left Valhalla, for they said I was dangerous. After they said you'd forget me, he unfolded it. The ink had bled slightly from years of hiding. He read, If fire forgets what it was lit for, it burns everything. Ah, but if it remembers who stood beside it when it first sparked, then maybe it becomes more than heat. Maybe it becomes home. He looked up, eyes wet, but steady. You wrote this for me? She nodded, eyes locked to his. This time, no veil, no shields. But I never sent it, she whispered, because I didn't believe you'd still be the same man after the fire took you. He didn't answer with words, not at first. He stood, walked around the fire not quickly, not in hunger, but as one who had waited long enough. He knelt before her, close but not touching. Kay then said very simply, "I would burn again if it meant you'd touch me once more." Something in her broke, not with pain, with relief. A dam of silence finally loosed. She reached for him. Not fast, not desperate, just real. Their hands met, palm to palm, skin to skin, and no visions came. No curse, no scream. Only warmth. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But she leaned into his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her. The fire behind them flickered higher, as if sighing with them. No oaths were spoken, no titles claimed. Only this, the long-held confession released at last into cinders that would never die. Love, when chosen freely, becomes its own kind of magic. They returned to Valhalla not as curse-breakers, not as fugitives, but as something far older than both, two souls that had seen each other beneath the ash and still stayed. The ruins were quieter now, no smoke, no whispers. Just moss curling over the stones and moonlight tracing the path back to the temple where it had all begun. He carried no torch, she needed none. Together they walked the hollow corridors past scorched arches and shattered runes until the heart of the temple opened before them. The altar was still there. So was the bowl, blackened by centuries of fire. A single bloom had sprouted in its center, white, frail, impossibly alive. She knelt first, not out of submission, but memory. He joined her, silent. They did not touch yet, not this time. "We're not here to break it," she whispered. "Only to change it." He nodded, slow, measured. A man made of flame, now learning the shape of water. What was done in love, he said, was only cursed when it was taken. She looked to him. "So what happens if we give it freely again?" She removed her gloves. He unfastened the clasp at his collar. Two gestures, quiet as snow. They reached for the bowl together, each placing one hand on the rim. Beneath their palms, the stone pulsed. Not hot, not cold. Just alive. They didn't recite the old binding spell. Those words had belonged to a time of fear. Instead, she spoke the truth. "I choose you not to save me. Not to bind me. But because when you burned, you still remembered the shape of my voice." He answered, voice rough with held years. "And when the world called you danger, you still looked at me like I was worth staying for?" The flower in the bowl flared with light. Its petals turned gold. And then, without a sound, it lifted into the air. Around them, the runes on the temple walls shimmered. No longer bleeding, no. Longer warning, just listening. They stood, and this time, they kissed. Not as promise, not as spell, but as something older than both. As choice. When they stepped outside, the wind had stilled. The sky had cleared. Valhalla, after 17 years, finally slept without sorrow. They did not stay. The world was wide. The flame was theirs now, not to guard, not to run from, but to carry. And wherever they walked, it lit the way. So ends the tale, not with a battle, not with a crown, but with a vow spoken in quiet. Love remembered itself. And that was a not to rewrite the curse. The curse